Hello, how are you doing? Remind me your name. Nicholas, thank you. There you go, thanks. How many of y'all, by a show of hands, have a resume? Okay. So by a show of hands, how many of you do not have a resume? Okay, that's awesome because by the end of this class, you will have a resume. Okay, that is one of the goals for this class is that you have a resume ready for you to go out. Okay, now, those of you who do have resumes, show me your hands one more time for me, please. Okay. Josh, how many times have you revised your resume?
Pretty much every time I go for a job.
Every time you go for a new job. That's an excellent answer. Okay. When we talk about resumes, we want to understand that your resume is designed to help you get the job that you're applying for. So sometimes you're going to change your resume based on the job you're applying for. Okay. Does that mean you're going to tell any kind of make up some information about yourself? No. Okay. You are still going to be telling the truth about yourself because that's what's going to get you the job and or the interview. And if you're not telling the truth about yourself on the resume, when you go for the interview and or the job and you can't do what you said you can do on your resume, it's going to reflect poorly on you. Okay. I had a one time in the summertime, I was the cook for a summer camp and I was the head cook in 2008. And I had an assistant. She was just out of culinary school in Austin, and she needed a few more hours, a couple more weeks to finish her internship. And so she was looking for a job up on the island after the summer was over, summer camp. And one day I just happened to see her resume, and everything that I did is what she put on her resume: planning the menus, ordering the food, receiving and storing the food, figuring out how to pull the product for what's going to be needed. Okay. All those things that I was doing, she had listed as her responsibilities at that job that she was at currently. Okay. So I was just like, okay, whatever. You do that to yourself. Okay. If you take that job and they hire you based on knowing that you have all these experience and you don't have that experience, it's not going to be a good situation. Okay. So your resume is basically a snapshot of your past experiences and how they demonstrate that you are the best candidate for that current job you're applying for. Okay. So if you have zero work experience, should you be applying for a manager's position? No. We should be looking for those entry level positions. Prep cook. Maybe you're going to be a server, okay, or a host or hostess, or maybe a busser, maybe a dishwasher, okay. That's how you get your foot in the door, and then you work your way up. Now, hopefully, those of y'all, because you're here for school, hopefully you'll be able to go in at either maybe not an exact entry level position, or if you do go into that entry level position, you'll be able to work your way up faster because you can demonstrate that you have those skills already, and then you can move up faster if you would like to. Okay. So, resume package. Let's talk about this. I already mentioned your resume should be accurate. Okay. What does it mean by effective? How is a resume effective or how is a resume ineffective? Okay, yeah, so it can be effective in a sense that it's going to pull specific words that it's being scanned for. Okay, I'm going to show you in a video that I've posted in my other class. I'm not sure if I've shared it with this class quite yet. I'm going to show you how you can utilize AI to help you make an effective resume. Okay. Um, what else? How could it be ineffective? Doesn't pertain to the job. Absolutely. So when I first came back to San Antonio in 2007, I was working for a YMCA camp in East Texas. And my really good friend that I worked with, her mom was really high up in the YMCA national office. And she said, David, send me your resume And I will forward it to whoever we need to forward it to in San Antonio, and we'll get you a job with the YMCA in San Antonio. And I thought, awesome. I'm 19 years, no, at that time I was 25 years old. And I was like, sweet, I have an instant in. I'm going to get a job at the YMCA. So I sent her my resume, and I probably made the same mistake that a lot of people make when they write their first ever resume. What goes on your resume? Your experience. Okay. What else? Yeah, the dates and that you were there at the specific jobs. Okay. What else goes on your resume? The list of the duties and things that you did. Okay, good. Yes. Okay, potential education or training, whatever you have available. Yep. What else goes on your resume? Your skills that you have. Okay. All of that. I put it all on my resume. Chester's Hamburgers, TGI Fridays, Cheesecake Factory. Does that have anything to do with the YMCA? No. Right? I worked for the Boy Scouts of America. I taught fifth grade outdoor education. I was a teacher for 4 years. I did all these things. And Paula calls me one day in her sweet voice and she says, David, I know you, but if I didn't know you, I would think, what does this young man want to do with the rest of his life? Like, what direction is he going? This resume is all over the place. And that's when I learned the lesson of you have to tailor your resume for the job you're applying for. Okay. So you have to figure out, how do the skills that I have here, how do they apply to the job that I am applying for? Okay. When I was in high school, I was in choir, and I was the librarian my junior year, and I was the wardrobe officer my senior year. So I had to check in and out the tuxedos for all the gentlemen in the choir. Okay. How could I relate those skills to a hospitality culinary job? So working with customer service, good. I could definitely use that customer service. Okay, so utilizing those customer service and interacting with those people, good. What else? I had to keep track of inventory, right? I had to keep track of the music, what was returned, what was not returned, what was checked out as a tuxedo, and then what was it when it came back? Was it in the same condition? Were there any holes in it? Did I have to repair anything? I had to keep track of all that inventory, right? And so how you term things, how you describe things in your resume needs to be in that industry jargon. Okay. If I said I checked in and out tuxedos, they're not going to care about that. But if I said I managed inventory, that sounds a little bit more applicable to what I'm doing. It's just now my inventory is ingredients versus tuxedos. Okay. So understanding how we can connect those things. The resume package is two parts. Most people don't really do cover letters, but I will still say that some businesses and some places do appreciate cover letters. It gives you a little bit more space to explain some stuff, especially if you have had no work experience. Okay. The key headings on your resume: education, your skills, your past experience. If you have any honors and awards or recognitions, you might want to put that on there. And then any kind of professional and community involvement. Okay. Which one is the most important? Okay. So George thinks it's skills. What else? Employment. Okay. Hold on. No, not Josh. You're not Nick. You're not Josh. You are A. Oh, that doesn't help me. I want to say Anthony, but that's not right. What? Andrew. Okay. Do you not have a paper? I think. Okay. That's why. Let's get you one. Okay, so Andrew says, I'll get you one at the end of class. Andrew says employment. What else? Samantha, what do you think? Which one's the most important? Education, okay. Anybody else? Okay, so your ability to learn. And that's how you're going to demonstrate that, maybe like in your skills. Yeah. The answer is whichever one's going to get you the job. If you have no experience, are you going to list that you have no experience up top? No. Okay. So the average recruitment manager spends 7 to 10 seconds reviewing your resume. Okay. So let's count that. 10 seconds. That's how long they're going to spend looking at your resume, determining whether or not you are the right candidate to bring in for an interview. Okay. So if you are a culinary student, you've never had a job in the kitchen before, but you are really interested in culinary arts because you're coming to school, you would put your education up top. Because if you don't have any experience and you list experience none, and you list your school down the bottom, they may not even get to the bottom of the page. They may say no experience. Okay, this one goes to this pile over here. Okay, so the point of this question really is that you put the whatever section is going to get you the job, is whatever's going to make you the most appealing as a person that they want to hire or they want to interview. Okay, so if you are, yes, go ahead, Ray.
I was going to say, yeah, that absolutely works because I have a lot of experience doing service, but I wanted to get a kitchen job. And so at the top of my resume, it said that I was in culinary school, and that was good enough to get me in.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And something else you can do. So let's say you do have a lot of different types of experience. You can actually have two employment or two experience sections. One is going to say related experience. Another one is going to say like just general experience. Okay. So related experience, you want to list that first because that's related specifically to the job you're applying for. And just general experience might be things where you're learning how to manage inventory, how to talk to customers, how to resolve conflict. Okay. And so you can actually have multiple sections just titled slightly different. On this slide, I'm going to go ahead and take out address from your heading. Most places, you don't need to put your address in. Okay. It might be on the application, so you don't have to put it on your resume. Remember, how long does someone take to spend reading your resume? 7 to 10 seconds. So if I remove that address, that's less for their eyes to try to figure out, and they're going to move on to the more important stuff. Okay. Social media. What do you think? Thumbs up, you should put social media on your resume, or thumbs down, you should not put social media on your resume? What do we think? Thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no. Unless it's relevant to your job. John Paul, what are you going to say? You think no? Okay. What if you have an Instagram account? That's a picture of all the cookies you've ever decorated, all the cakes you ever decorated. Okay. Here's the thing with social media. If you put it on your resume, that is an open invitation for them to go and check out your social media. Okay. If you don't put it on your resume and you are a viable candidate, someone they're really interested in, chances are they're going to go to your social media, regardless, whether the invitation or not. Okay. So what you can do, how many of you have a LinkedIn profile? Anybody have a LinkedIn profile? Cool. Handful of people. Excellent. LinkedIn. Kyle, what's the benefit of having a LinkedIn profile? Absolutely, for networking and helping build that network and those professional people, right? Um, LinkedIn is becoming more and more like as a format like Facebook, where it has your news feed, all the things. So people that you're connected with, that they're posting information, posting jobs that are available at their workplace. One of the biggest things that's happened since the pandemic is now LinkedIn has a willing to work kind of badge on your LinkedIn. So if somebody is a recruiter and they find yours, that means basically you're open for a job, like you're looking for a job. It's an easy way for the recruiters to find you and maybe potentially look at your past experience and does it align with the job that they're recruiting for? And can they then reach out to you and invite you to come in for an interview or sit for an interview? Okay. So LinkedIn is a really good opportunity for you to connect. It's also a great place for you to list anything and everything you've ever done, right? And your resume, you have one page, maybe 2 pages total, but on your LinkedIn, you can keep putting all that stuff on there. Yeah, absolutely. So connecting with your classmates and your colleges, cool. Yeah. If someone, we do have like, it's kind of unspoken, and sometimes this happens, sometimes it doesn't, depends. But sometimes if you put that you went to a certain school on your LinkedIn profile and the recruiter is the person who's interviewing also went to that school, then it kind of gives you that instant connection. And whether or not that gets you the job or not, sometimes it's about who you know, not necessarily what you know. So that might be an example of a time that someone sees that they have that commonality, and then it kind of helps break the ice in the interview process. The other thing for email and phone, you just need to put your email address. Okay. You don't need to do email colon and then write your email address. And you don't need to do phone colon and write your phone number. Okay. Why? We know that a 10-digit number is a phone number. You don't need to tell me that it's a phone number. Okay. We know that an email address is an email address. Think back 10, 15 years ago when emails were new, that maybe somebody looking at that didn't quite know what an email was. Okay. Now everybody knows what an email address is. Okay. Same thing with phone numbers. So again, if we remove those 5 letters, that helps that person that's reviewing your resume for 10 seconds. That's less things for them to look at. Okay. Let's talk about emails for a moment. Okay. What kind of email address should you have on your resume? Selena says a professional one. Okay. Okay. So I love kitties at hotmail.com. The recruiter does not care that you love kittens. Okay. Unless maybe you're applying for a veterinary position or working with animals, maybe. Okay. But if you're not, it doesn't matter. So your email address should be something that's professional. Maybe it's just your name. Okay. Something really easy and simple. Okay. So something that's not going to be easily confused. So having hyphens and underscores, right? Having the underline versus a hyphen, something that can very easily be mistransposed. And so something that's very simple, clean. It also needs to be an email address that you actually read. Okay, if you are looking for a job, sometimes they will reach out to you via email versus a phone call. And so it's something you need to check on a regular basis. All right. I think I have 6 different email addresses that come to my phone for the different associations and mailboxes that I manage and monitor. So if you have a smartphone and you don't know how to add an email address, come find me. I'll be happy to show you how to do that. It's super easy. Okay. Phone numbers. If you are actively applying for jobs, you need to make sure your voicemail is empty or has space. Okay. How many times have you called somebody and it says the voicemail box is not set up or the voicemail box is full? How can they leave you a message? They're not going to wait and call you back tomorrow. They're going to move on to the next candidate. Okay. So you may lose that opportunity to be interviewed for a job. So as you are doing that, it's really important. Now, I don't think we do it very much anymore, but at one point we used to have ringback songs. Y'all remember ringback songs? Am I showing my date? I'm showing my age. Okay. A ringback song is instead of hearing like the ringing, the person would actually hear a song. Yeah. And sometimes they were inappropriate songs. And so I don't think we do that anymore. But if we do, make sure it's an appropriate song. Okay. Um, your resume, we have two different types of resumes. Most of you are going to be using a functional resume, meaning it's things that are about your jobs. You're maybe applying for an entry level position, so your experience section might be a little bit limited. So you're going to focus primarily on the skills that you have and the education that you've amassed. Okay. If you are in school right now, do you put St. Philip's College on your resume if you have not graduated? Absolutely. Right? You can put expected graduation of December 2026. Okay. You can always put your expected graduation, but it's important that you list that on there so that way they know that you're going to school, especially if the field that you're studying is relevant to where you are applying. For those people who have a lot more work experience, you might have an advanced skills resume. Okay. And in that, we look at usually about 1 page for every 10 years of work experience that's related to the industry. All right. When you are looking at developing your resume, you want to be consistent in your layout. You want to make sure that the text and the font that you're using is professional. Okay. Um, we always go when it comes from employment and or education. We always do the newest to the oldest. Okay, so we do what was called reverse chronological. So we put the newest, what's most current, and we work all the way back to the oldest. Okay. At some point, those of us who are more advanced in years can drop off the high school. We don't have to put our high school and the year we graduated from high school on our resume. Sometimes, if we do that, that person's be like, wow, they graduated in 2000. They're old. I don't know. Sorry, I'm just putting myself out there. Okay, because I don't want to offend anybody else. But yeah, so sometimes they may not look at you because of they there is some kind of misconception about hiring someone older. Okay, or same thing with younger people. Um, so it's really important that as you're doing that, we don't need that I started on the day and the date of the of your employment, just the month and the year. That's it. Okay. I don't need to know that you started on January 27th. Okay. You can just say January of this year. Okay. Um, that second bullet point, it's important for you to bold the job title, not the employer. Why do you think that is, Josh?
They're looking for what you do that before.
Exactly. They're looking at what you can do. What positions have you held in the past? How does that relate to the position that you're applying for? Okay. All right. So when we are looking at the different skills that we are listing on our resume, okay, we want them to be specific as to the job that we are applying for. Okay. Think about those transferable skills. Remember how I mentioned in choir, I was dealing with music and tuxedos, but I might say that I just was managing inventory. Okay. So how can you take the skills that you have and transfer them into another field, another type of industry? Okay. And then we have soft skills. Who has heard of that term, soft skills? Who's ever heard someone say soft skills or talk about soft skills? Okay. Keep your hand up if you're not quite sure what they're talking about when they say soft skills. Okay. So what's the opposite of soft? Hard skills are like those technical skills, right? Can you julienne? Can you dice? Can you broil? Can you fry? Can you saute? Those are the hard skills. Your soft skills are more about like your interpersonal. How do you work with people? Are you a team player? Do you show up for work on time? Do you give any kind of an effort? Okay. Do you smile when you're interacting with people? Do you make eye contact when you're talking with guests? Okay. So, all those things are soft skills that you can actually develop and work on. Some things are maybe a little bit more innate, and some things are more natural to some people. Other things you still have to kind of work a little bit harder on. Okay. But those soft skills are really important when you're working with a team. I had a HR manager tell me that if you show up on time and try just a little bit harder than your coworker, you're probably going to advance. You'll go up until like, you'll advance into management more quickly. Okay. You don't have to be like the best shining star employee. That if you can be, that's great. But all you have to do is show up on time and try just a little bit harder than the person next to you, and you'll be successful. You'd be surprised how many times people just don't show up. How many of you have coworkers that are like that? They just call in all the time. They don't show up. Okay. How frustrating is that? Okay. And how long do they usually last? Hopefully not that long, right? Because if they last a long time, what message does that tell everybody else that shows up on time? Yeah, it's okay. Show up. Don't show up. You'll stay here for a long time, right? That communicates, the management of that communicates to all the other employees. Okay. So it's really important that you are taking that into consideration. When you are writing skills and or you're writing accomplishments and things like that, you want to start the bullet statement with a strong action verb or a strong verb or a strong descriptor. Okay. What's one word that you typically do not see on a resume? It's a single letter. I heard it. I. Why don't you hear the word I? Why don't you see the word I on your resume? Because it's already about you. It's implied that it's already about it. So rather than saying I did this, take out the word I and just say did this. And you list it as a bullet statement like you see up on the screen. And it's a lot easier for somebody to focus on those action verbs, right? And so as you're writing it, if you want to write the word I, that's fine. But then when you actually go to finish and finalize your resume, take out that word I. And then that way you'll have your bullet statements. Okay. Okay. So if you're bilingual, yeah, absolutely. Let's see. It is important with your resume, very clear, very concise, to the point. Like I said, the formatting should be consistent. So all of the titles should be bolded. All the information that you want pointed out should be consistent. Okay. Why is grammar important on the resume? Santini, why do you think grammar is important on a resume? Absolutely. So the attention to detail that you put into your resume is also going to maybe communicate the attention to detail that maybe you'll play on the job, that you'll employ on the job. Okay. So grammar is really important. Using punctuation, using correct spelling, making sure that you are correcting any errors and things like that. Okay. One thing that I want to mention when it comes to that first statement up there, the electronic file. How many of you, anybody in here use Apple products? Okay, cool. Sometimes if you're using Apple and you send something to somebody who's using a PC, sometimes the formatting gets off. Okay. And so the best way to alleviate that is to save your resume and save it as a PDF. Send it as a PDF. Okay. because that PDF is going to preserve any kind of formatting that you have, okay? Whether they're opening it on a Mac or they're opening it on a PC. So when you go to save something, you might have 2 copies of it. So if you look real quick, let me show you an example. So one of the things that I do here at St. Philip's is I manage and, oops, that's not what I wanted. One of the things I do is I manage the digital screens that you see at the front entrance of the entrances of each building, of our building here. And so oftentimes I create the, you can't really see that. I'll zoom it in. Maybe you guys can see it that way. But oftentimes I will create it. I create the sign itself in PowerPoint as a slide, and then I save it as a JPEG. The image is what I put up on the screen out there, and the PowerPoint is what I'm able to edit. Okay. And so you may have your resume where it is the Word file and then your same name as a PDF. Okay. Let's talk about cover letters really quickly, and then we'll wrap up this conversation. All right, cover letters. Cover letters are just a simple, they're a business letter. There's a specific format that you want to follow, okay? That first paragraph, you want to make sure that you are telling the reader what job you're applying for, okay? And where you found the job posting. What job you're applying for and where you found out the position, okay? If Kyle works at a restaurant and he's referring me as a cook, when I write that letter, I want to mention that I know Kyle, and he works at the restaurant. And he told me there's an open cook position. So I'm interested in applying for that position. Paragraph number 2, okay? Now, when I say paragraph, what do you guys think about when I say the word paragraph? How many sentences? 4 to 5 sentences per paragraph, right? 2 sentences, maybe 3 at the most, okay? So 2 sentences. I'm interested in looking for the cook position that I found out about from Kyle, or I found out your position on Indeed.com, okay? Very short to the point. New paragraph. The relatable things that you have and why you think you are the best candidate. I feel like my experience as XYZ qualifies me to be hired for this position, okay? Or be honest up front. I have no experience, but I am a culinary arts major at St. Philip's College, and I am looking forward to getting my foot in the door and starting my first job in my career of culinary arts and growing with your organization. Okay. Paragraph 3, thank you so much for your time. I really hope I'll be considered for a job, for an interview. You can contact me at, put your email address and your phone number. Even though it's on your resume, put it again in that last paragraph. Okay. Very simple, brief, to the point. This cover letter, that middle section, that second paragraph is really an opportunity for you to be able to explain to somebody if you have a specific situation that you're trying to, never had a job before, but this is my goal. These are my career aspirations, okay? Sometimes people will put that as an objective statement right under their name on their resume, and that's okay if you don't plan on putting a cover letter, okay? As you're writing that cover letter, you want to make sure that you are reviewing any kind of keywords that come from your resume. Or sorry, not from your resume, from your job description, from the job posting. You want to make sure that what you put on your resume and your cover letter aligns with that. We talked about not using the word I in your resume. You can use the word I in your cover letter, but just use it sparingly. Okay, don't start every single sentence with I. You want to figure out a way to say something without using that word I. If you don't know who you're sending that letter to, how do you usually send a letter? How do you start it off? To Whom it may concern, right? That's way too generic. Okay. Now, if Kyle is referring me to a job and he's like, David, Josh is the HR manager, I'm going to say, Dear Josh. Okay. If I don't know, I'm going to say something along the lines of Dear Hiring Manager or Dear HR Director or Dear Recruitment, whatever. Okay. That's a little bit more specific than to whom it may concern. Okay. You want to make sure you refer to the fact that you have the resume attached. And there we go. That's pretty much all I wanted to cover for that. All right. So for your assignment, I wanted to kind of start this a little bit early in the semester to give you a little bit more time to work on your resume. Okay. If you have a resume already, you are more than welcome to use the resume you already have for this class. And you can learn how to tailor it and make it more appropriate for a specific job. Okay. In Canvas, let's see, Nicholas came in. There we go. Okay. So let me see if I put it. I know I have it in my other class. All right. And let me check to see if it's in this class. Not yet, but I will put it here. Okay. So I'm going to put 2 videos creating a resume using Google Gemini and editing an existing resume using Google Gemini. Okay. Google Gemini. Who has never heard of Google Gemini? Anybody never heard of Google Gemini? Okay. Who's heard of Chat GPT? Okay. So Google Gemini is Google's version of Chat GPT. Okay. They are what's called a generative AI. Okay. How many of you have used AI in the past? Siri, possibly, yeah. Siri counts. That's AI. That's artificial intelligence. How many of you have ever done a word check on a document? Spell check? That's AI. Okay. What's that? Right. No, but it's still artificial intelligence, right? It is. Yeah. So Gemini, ChatGPT, Grok, all those are more, they can generate something, right? They also learn from how you do it, right? So you can actually, if you use AI enough, you can actually train it to give responses in your own tone of voice, which I think is very odd. But hey, if it's more effective, I went to a presentation at a conference last year in October, and the keynote speaker basically trained his AI to answer emails in his own tone of voice. And so it's very interesting. But so I have put up these 2 videos. I'm not going to go over them in class because you can watch them. I'll post them in our recorded lectures module so you can find them. But when you're using an LM, like a learning large language model, LLM, right? Okay, thank you so much. We got our resident tech professional. Thank you, Kenneth. So when we're using those, oftentimes your prompt is most important to get the result of the type of what's what I'm looking for. The result of the what you're going to be getting from the generative AI. Okay. So we don't use it as if we're using like a Google search. Okay. We use it in a way that what we want in the end, we want a certain product. We want a certain outcome, something that's going to produce and help us. Okay. And so oftentimes it's basically like having a chat. Okay. You're basically chatting with the AI. You're going to ask questions. It's going to ask you questions. You respond to those questions back and forth. until the very end when it creates the actual document that you're looking for, okay? Or same thing with your resume. When you upload your current resume and you ask a question, here's my job posting, here's my job description of the job I'm looking for, here's my current resume. Can you help me make sure that my current resume is aligned with the job that I'm applying for? It's going to analyze both things, and it's going to give you some feedback about what you can do to enhance your resume to make it more aligned with the job you're applying for. Okay? Questions, comments, concerns? Is it cheating to use AI? Yeah. Okay, if you're going to try to take credit for that, right, as something that's some information that you created, absolutely, right? But if you're using it as in a way that is helping you to be more effective, okay, you also want to think about, am I just going to take whatever AI gives me and submit it as my final project? Or am I going to review it first to make sure that it's actually accurate? Okay, hopefully the latter. Hopefully you're actually going to review it to make sure that it's accurate. Because again, especially with your resume, if you are submitting that as a resume, the person that you're reviewing your resume, they're going to expect you to have those skills. Okay, so you may want to take your resume even after AI has given you some like a format or a foundation. You may want to review it and maybe put some things in your own tone of voice, because you don't want to show up and not have the resume match the person that's coming in for an interview. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? Yes, I will. I think I can copy. Nope, I can't. But I will put it in before I leave today. I'll copy the links over into our class. All right. Questions, comments, concerns? Yes, sir, George. Yeah, absolutely.
It's so different.
Yeah, that's great. So again, you can utilize the AI to help you. How do I effectively communicate a career change from this industry to this industry? And here's my current resume. How can I um, most effectively communicate how my previous skills transfer to this new career? Okay, it'll give you that feedback, and you'll see that in the video. Absolutely, good question. That's okay.
And basically, those reasons, when you say something in a negative way, you back off. So, with disability, yeah. But I know he can't say anything more in an interview because I'm likely to just cut you off.
Yeah.
I don't know what reason, but there's a lot of things that
So you're saying you left a previous job due to a disability, and so you're asking how do you address that in an interview?
well, on paper, well, not on paper because they're gonna look at the work
Right.
and question that I was.
Yeah. So depending on, I mean, because you never want to speak disparagingly, you never want to speak negatively of your old employer, even though maybe it was a really bad experience, right? So something along the lines being a little bit more vague of there was no opportunity for growth, and I'm looking for more opportunity for growth, right?
You don't want to put that flex disability, like physical things like that.
Well, so here's the thing. Here. I mean, like on your resume. Um, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one. I'll have to do some research and kind of figure that out. Maybe I can ask some of my friends who are HR and recruitment. Yeah. So I think the application itself, and or like, so I was going to say, like in the job posting, it's going to say you have to have the ability to stand for 8 hours, right? And if you don't have that ability, then you don't meet that qualification for the job. And so you'd have to look for a job that you do meet those qualifications for. So there are reasonable accommodations, right? But some jobs you have like essential skills that you have to be able to perform in order to be considered for that position. So that's a really good question. I'll have to do some research and thinking about that. So remind me next week, and I'll follow up with you. That's a very good question. Thank you for asking that. All right. So in the last 20 minutes of class, we're going to get out about 5 o'clock today. Okay. So in the last 20 minutes of class, I do want to talk a little bit about dining etiquette. We're going to go into a lot more detail next week. But one of the things that I think is more important, not only just understanding dining etiquette from how do you behave at a table, but for us in our industry and those of us in these programs, we need to understand how to set the expectation and how to set the ambiance and the atmosphere for our guests. Okay. And so let's see, let me close that, stop the share. Let's do whiteboard, new whiteboard, classic. There we go. Okay. So in what tool do we have at our disposal to determine how our tables need to be set? The menu. Who said that? Excellent. Vanessa. The menu tells us what silverware we have to have out on our tables. Okay. So next week in class, we are going to do an activity where we are actually going to be setting up some tables. Okay. So I'm going to put this information in here, and then next week you can be prepared. So our plate is in the center of our table, or our place setting. Okay. Let me draw it just a little bit slower. All right. So what kind of utensils do we have on our table? We have forks. What else? Spoon, knife. Yep. We're going to call it a glass. Okay, so yeah, so we're going to talk about specific utensils, but in general, we have forks, spoons, knives, and glasses, right? We have a napkin. For very specific menus, yes. Okay. We also might have a B&B plate, which stands for bread and butter. Okay. So all these different components. Typically, we're going to find this in more fine dining and or banquet style service, not so much in a fast casual or bistro style. We might find it a little bit more in upscale places. Okay. There is a specific side of the plate that the forks and the knives and the spoons and where everything goes. Okay. Raise your hand if you think you know where the forks go. Ricardo, where do the forks go? On the right? Okay. Who agrees with Ricardo? Okay. No, Lonnie agrees. Okay. Who thinks it go on the left? Okay. That was a good guess. You had a 50-50 shot. It is on the left-hand side though. Okay. And the way you remember that is how many letters are in the word left? 4 letters. The word fork has how many letters? 4. So your forks are always on the left-hand side of the plate. Okay. Like Autumn said, we may have multiple forks. Okay. There we go. I'm not an artist. That's okay. They look like forks. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we have forks. You might be asking, Mr. Minsky, why do we have 3 forks? One for the salad, one for the entree, and maybe one for the appetizer. Okay. If we had a dessert fork, where would it go? At the top. This is where our dessert fork is going to go. Okay. So if our forks are on the left-hand side, what goes on the right-hand side? Knife and spoon. How many letters in the word right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 letters, 5 letters, 5 letters. Spoon, knife, and glass, or drink. They all have 5 letters. Okay. We'll talk about that in just a second. Yep. Okay. So we have a serrated knife, a dinner knife, soup spoon, iced teaspoon, dessert spoon. Okay. And our glass is going to go at the tip of the knife. So we got spoon, knife, glass, forks. Our napkin we'll put right here in the middle of the plate. Now, of course, the plate is not there, right? We don't have a plate. Unless, of course, we have a salad. Sometimes we do what's called preset salads. And that allows us to help us with our service. We'll talk about that at some point. And then the last thing is our bread and butter plate. Okay? So everybody go like this with your fingers, your hands. Put them down. What letter does your right hand make? What letter does your right hand make? A lowercase. Look at your hands like this. Put them on the table like this. Your right hand makes a D for your drink. Okay? Nope, like this. Like this. There you go. Okay? Your left hand makes a B. That's your bread and butter. So that's how you tell the difference. Your bread and butter's on the left-hand side. Your drink is on the right-hand side. Okay? Abraham's mind is blown. That's how we know which side of the plate are. How many of you are left-handed? Anybody left-handed? Okay. So when you reach for your drink, if we have a round table, you're going to have bread and a drink right there. Okay. And so oftentimes, if you're left-handed, you're accustomed to just reaching with your left hand to get a drink. Well, that's somebody else's drink. Or if I'm right-handed, I'm accustomed to my bread being right here on my right hand, my dominant side. That's somebody else's bread plate. Okay. Now, if somebody is in a round situation, a round table setting, okay, everything's kind of all crammed right next to each other. So if somebody starts the bread in the wrong place, just go with it, right? They set the tone for the rest of the table. So why don't you be the person that sets the tone for everybody, okay? So let's see. Autumn has a good question about which fork goes where and what fork is there, okay? We always work from the outside of our place settings in to the center, okay? So that's why our iced teaspoon is first, because we'll probably get our drink served first, and so we need that spoon so that we can stir any sugar or anything into our beverage, okay? When we're sitting down at a table, if we have that sugar packet from that iced tea, okay, typically what you want to do is put that sugar packet on the table first and then rest your spoon on that sugar packet, the empty sugar packet. Because typically, once a piece of silverware has touched the food and or our mouth, or in this case, a drink, It does not touch the linen on the table. It does not go back to the table. Okay. If you need a break, if you need to take a step back and maybe not eat so quickly like Mr. Yaminsky does, because I'm always used to having a 10-minute break and I got to eat all my food in 10 minutes. Okay. You rest your silverware on the plate. You don't put it back on the tablecloth. Okay. And that is why all of our silverware is laid out. Because when we are done with the salad, our fork goes away. Our fork goes with that plate. Okay. When I eat my soup, that soup spoon goes with my bowl of soup. Okay. Why do I have two different knives? Okay. So I still have two forks left here. So I may have an appetizer of some sort. Maybe it's like jumbo shrimp, right? I'm not going to just pick up that shrimp and eat it. I'm going to use my fork and my knife. You'll notice that this one is not serrated. So it actually is more, you can cut things like chicken, fish. There's a fish knife, but we don't typically use those. Or shrimp or things like that. Okay, maybe we have scallops as an appetizer. Okay, the serrated knife, the real jagged, those real super sharp. If I see a serrated knife, what kind of protein can I expect? Steak, red meat, maybe pork, something a little bit more substantial, lamb, maybe something a little bit more substantial than chicken, right? We can still cut chicken with a regular dinner knife. Okay, that goes away. And then the last thing is our fork and spoon for dessert. Okay. Now, this is something that I learned when I was a student at St. Philip's, that there is a specific way that a dessert fork and spoon has to be placed. Because when you're done, then your silverware can easily go to the correct side of the plate. Okay. The only reason why I remember that is because 15 years ago, I got 5 points taken off of my catering project. Okay. 5 points. Imagine it. I did not get a perfect score. I was devastated. Okay. I did not get a perfect 100. But how many times do you think in the last 15 years I have placed my silverware wrong? Never again. Right. I learned that lesson here at St. Philip's as a student. And then I go out in the industry and I was able to perform in a way that presents a polished image. Okay, because the guest and the client who is paying $150 per person, they understand how the placement should be. Okay, and so it's really important that we learn those lessons here so that we can make the mistake and then we can avoid them in the future. Okay, questions, comments, concerns about table setting? Actually, you know what? She's not, but I'm actually having lunch with her on Friday. She's going to come and see the building for the first time. Um, yes, Chef Brown was my instructor for professional cookie dining room service. Yes, he was my teacher. Any other questions about dining etiquette or how things are placed? That's a great question. I would probably bring them out right before the course or bring them out as the course comes out. Yeah. So if we're gonna have like any kind of claw crushers or whatever you call them or the picks, right? I would bring them out to the specific people that are going to need them. I wouldn't put them out at every single place setting. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So if I am only having a salad and an entree, I don't have to put out a soup spoon, right? So as a guest, when I sit down to look at my place setting, I can kind of start picturing what my meal is going to be like. But as a server, I also want to double check what is my menu, okay? And we could also potentially have like a knife and a fork for your salad, right? So if we have a wedge salad, who does not know what a wedge salad is? Oh my gosh, it's the most amazing salad. I think it's so funny. It's literally iceberg lettuce, but I don't know what it is about it. It's my most favorite salad. It's usually got blue cheese dressing, blue cheese crumbles, bacon, maybe some eggs, maybe some cherry tomatoes, right? And it's literally a wedge of iceberg lettuce. I feel like it's like the laziest composition of a salad. Okay, but I don't know why it tastes so good. But if I'm going to have a wedge salad, I also need to have a knife that I can cut that salad with. Okay, because otherwise I'm going to use my serrated knife, and then when my steak comes, I'm not going to have a knife. Okay, because I remember all that silverware goes with the plates. And so, as those of you who are going into not necessarily the professional cooking class, your next class after that is going to be international cuisine. That'll be upstairs in Artemisia's. You want to check with the chef and see what is the plating. Do we have giant wedges of tomatoes? Do we have giant slices of tomatoes as our salad? Maybe it's like a caprese salad where it's the tomato and the mozzarella and the balsamic glaze. And so a guest is going to need a knife to cut those tomato slices. Okay, or is it something that they can just use just a regular fork for? Okay, so understanding how the plating is one extra level of attention to detail when it comes to that. Where are my any hospitality people in here? No hospitality people? Like actual hospitality majors, hospitality management, hotel management, restaurant management. Okay, excellent, cool. So it's important for us to know the front of the house because the chefs are the ones in the back preparing the food. Typically, it's the front of the house people that are responsible for setting things up. So we want to make sure that our guests are ready to go. I had a wedding one time. I was doing a day of coordination, and the hotel came to me. The hotel employees, banquet captain said, "David, we're going to set up the tables, but we need to know which goes first, the champagne glass or the wine glass." So as I'm setting up this is my water glass. Okay, oops, I just erased. Undo that. This is my water glass. And we have to know, they're asking me, where do we put the champagne glass and where do we put the wine glass? What do you think my question was to them? Alanis. Yeah, go for it. If you need to leave, go for it. We're almost done. Yeah, we should be done in the next minute or so. If they're asking me, we're sitting at the table, okay, where does the wine glass go? Where does the champagne glass go? What is the question I asked, do you think? What will we use first? Exactly. Same thing with our silverware. Same thing applies. If the guests are going to sit down and we're going to do a champagne toast, that champagne glass needs to be in front. But if we're not doing champagne toast until after dinner is served, that wine glass needs to be up front. Okay. So understanding etiquette, understanding how things are placed is really important. Okay. From the front of the house and the back of the house perspective. All right. So I will see you all next week. Go ahead and start drafting your resume. The assignment's not going to be due until the following week, but go ahead and give it a shot. And I will post those videos in the next 15 minutes.
That's technically 5:30.
It is, yep. But we're done a little.